theology matters. And as I've already explained, like responding in the knowledge that we are all made in the image of God, and that's where our dignity and value comes from. So grounding that in the gospel, but the gospel isn't just a bed of roses, it's there to confront us of where we fall short. And maybe sometimes where we fall short is that we have biases against people who don't look the same as us.
Unapologetic from Premier Unbelievable.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Ruth Jackson and you are listening to Unapologetic, which aims to help you grow your confidence in thinking through and sharing your faith. And we'd love to know what you think of the programme, good or bad. Do let us know via our social media or by emailing unbelievable@premier.org.uk. And today we're carrying on our conversation with the brilliant Clare Williams, who is the founder of Get Real, which is an apologetics ministry engaging with the big questions of life, faith and culture. Hello again, Clare.
Hi, Ruth.
So, Clare, the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 brought issues of racial justice to the fore for many people. Of course, it's not that these things weren't there before, but it kind of brought it all right into the foreground. I mean, what are some of the ways that churches and Christians should be responding to some of these issues? I'm aware that's a huge question, but, you know, what's just some of the ways that we really should be responding to this?
Yeah, I think I'll actually comment on what I did see and what I think has been quite good practice, which is to listen, to actually, really listen to what your Black brothers and sisters are saying, your Black friends, Black work colleagues are saying in this space. So we need to be listening. We also need to be thinking as a church, regardless of whether you're in a multi-ethnic church, Black majority church, we need to think about the issue of justice and see how justice actually points so clearly to God. You know, I think a lot of people were a bit afraid to talk about justice and to talk about racism because it was, you know, the social gospel or critical race theory and all the bogeymen that are meant to be a threat to Christianity in the West today. But actually, when people are passionate about a justice issue and say we're talking about racism here, that is a perfect opportunity to talk about the God who cares deeply about justice. So I think in the listening process, even though you may not agree with what certain views have to say, secular views, critical race theorist views, whatever, you might not agree with those things, but actually listening and pointing people to the God who cares about justice, I think is really powerful.
You mentioned critical race theory there. Obviously, there's lots of, helpful insights that people can go to. Unbelievable did a show about it. But just quickly, if someone's not heard of that or isn't sure where they can find out about that, would you just sort of define that term and just give us a little bit of a potted history of critical race in a minute?
No, how quickly can I do this? So critical race theory is an idea that comes from the social sciences, critical theory. Critical theory involves like queer theory or feminist theory. So critical race theory is about issues of race and justice. So it emerges from that kind of social science space. And it was kind of founded by a guy called Derek Bell in America. And he and others, so Black practitioners who were also legal professionals as well, they were very much involved in the legal profession of the US, they saw a disparity, or they saw what they saw as a two-tier justice system for Black Americans, and wrote about it and critiqued it and looked at statistics and looked at outcomes for Black men and women and said that there's a problem here. So they were theorizing about the issues that they see kind of systemically and institutionally in America, and that has kind of gained a lot of ground. And with all that happened in 2020, that has come to the fore. So just to say, 2020 was a time where it came to the fore. But this has been going on for a long time in the academy. And so it's not brand new information, kind of like we, the popular culture, have just been introduced to it. However, along with the emergence of critical race theory, kind of like in the popular kind of level, has come a lot of criticism, I would say, from Christians, saying it's a different worldview, saying it's antithetical to Christianity, etc., for a number of reasons. But I think the apologist Sean McDowell says 3 bits of advice: read critical race theory for yourself, read it charitably, and read it critically. And in so doing, what he's saying is, don't just listen to your favorite, evangelical Christian giving you a summary of critical race theory, and I'm giving you a summary myself. But just because you don't want to just be hearing what you want to hear, create echo chambers for ourselves. Have a broad view and do so charitably and critically.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much, Claire. Sorry, I just sprung that on you, but I thought it was, it's a helpful thing to hear about. Claire, what advice would you give to young Black Christians who are in the throes of racial injustice, whatever that looks like in their context? Is there anything that you would say to encourage them? How would you get alongside them in this situation? Yeah, well, the first thing I'll say is that I'm really sorry that you're facing whatever situation you might be facing. I know what that's like myself. I know what it's like to have tried to do everything you're supposed to do, get your education, love the Lord, all of that kind of stuff. I know what that's like. But then to still encounter racial injustice. Just to give an example, I was traveling somewhere to speak not too long ago, and I was frisked at the airport on the way there and randomly stopped on the way back. And that is a common thing when I travel. And people might be thinking, whoa, everyone gets stopped at the airport. Not as much, it's a regular thing. And it fills me with dread every time I go to airport security. It really does. So even though you've done all the right things, to still be seen as a suspect, there's something about it that is eroding and undermining and makes you feel horrible. And I'm really sorry that you're having to deal with those things. What I would say is that please don't trade in your faith. Okay, the very fact that we believe that we have inherent human dignity, that we are made in the image of God, or the very fact that we get angry about being treated badly, is pointing us to a God who has made us in his image with dignity. Because if we are just, a bag of atoms in a body, and we decide our value for ourselves, then when people decide that maybe I'm not worthy of dignity because I'm a Black woman, then what have I got to say about that? But if there is an objective standard, and that resides in God himself for what we are worth as human beings, then that is actually pointing me to God, not away from him. And so my anger, my upset, my everything I feel, all the hurt I feel, is actually pointing me to a God he doesn't just make, my human dignity possible, but actually cares deeply about it. How should Christians be responding to these issues of racial injustice? What can we be doing to practically help to try and turn the tide of these tragic situations? So I would say I'm going to use an acronym, ACT, and A stands for affirm. So not just listen, but actually affirm Black pain. There are things that no matter how much I'm educated, right, I will still have to face regardless. Okay. So affirming that there are some things that are going to be different about my life experience to maybe my my Christian white friends and brothers and sisters. The C of ACT is to challenge. Be ready to be challenged about it. It's confronting to have these conversations. I remember doing an unconscious bias test a few years ago, and I was shocked to know what biases I had, and I had to take that to the Lord and ask God to change me, and that was part of my sanctification process. So be prepared to be challenged and for uncomfortable conversations. And finally, the T of that is that theology matters. And as I've already explained, like responding in the knowledge that we are all made in the image of God, and that's where our dignity and value comes from. So grounding that in the gospel, but the gospel isn't just a bed of roses. It's there to confront us of where we fall short. And maybe sometimes where we fall short is that we have biases against people who don't look the same as us. And then when we're confronted with that, and sometimes that anger, that kind of reaction, is actually the Holy Spirit convicting us deeply, and saying, look, you've got an issue here, you need to change. Those are my thoughts. We're going to discuss this more in another podcast, but I guess there's the one issue of creating church spaces, I suppose, for Christians that are, that's racially just and a place of openness and all of that. But there's also an evangelism issue, isn't there? Because for a lot of the Black community, there's a huge amount of pain tied up in racism and Christianity being a tool of oppression and the white man's religion and all of that. So again, a huge question. But how do we do evangelism in a way that is being aware and, being aware of racial injustice and wanting to acknowledge people's pain, but at the same time speak to them about a religion that for them they may consider to be a tool of oppression?
Yeah, I think it's about getting up to speed with, and in the same way that, generic apologetics course, you would know what that maybe the 10 top questions, objections to Christianity are, and you do significant research to see why people are saying those things and look for responses, historical, scientific, philosophical responses. Do the same with those questions where people object to Christianity because of racism. Respect the question. As we say, put some respect on our name. You know what I mean? It's a legitimate question. And if someone says, well, I don't want to be a Christian because the church is racist, and then we say, but Jesus saves. It is true, amen, that Jesus saves. But we need to have, First Peter 3:15, always be ready to give an answer. And that readiness comes with preparation. And that means doing the relevant research, consulting the thinkers and the Black scholars and the Black Christians who are on the forefront of this, and being prepared to have an answer. And also not being afraid to say, yeah, the church, we've messed up. And I'm really sorry about that. That is really disarming. And as long as obviously it's genuine, and some people don't like that sort of thing because they're like, well, I'm not apologizing for the sin of my ancestors. No one's asking you to do that. We're saying the church gets it wrong sometimes. But actually, that shouldn't have happened. So acknowledging someone's pain, not being afraid to apologize for where the church has messed up, because it can be very disarming and very human, but also having the knowledge of, as we're going to get into, the contributions of Black Christians to the Christian faith.
I mean, obviously, your website, your resources, your Instagram, GetReal123 is incredibly helpful for this. But if people wanted to find out a little bit more, they wanted to do some reading, are there any places that you would point people to try and get their heads around some of this stuff?
Yeah, the first book I would say you must read is Unapologetics, okay? And it's edited by Dr. Eric Mason. And in that book, he gives, with a range of Black apologist contributors, gives a summary, not quite summary, but really clear explanations of the places where particularly Black Christians go to once they leave the faith. Sort of African indigenous spirituality, Kemeticism, Hebrew Israelites, Nation of Islam. And so understand where people have turned to and why they've turned to those places. I think that's a really good resource. Urban Apologetics by Eric Mason.
Clare Williams, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for listening to Unapologetic. As always, you can find out more about our guest, the wonderful Clare Williams, through the link at the bottom of today's show. And don't forget that there's more shows, articles and resources on our website, premierunbelievable.com. You can also register there for a free ebook. Don't say we never give you anything. Join us next week as we carry on the conversation with Clare, where we're going to be looking a little bit more about some of the stuff that we began to unpack just there, looking at young Black people leaving the church, as well as talking about the Black consciousness movement.
Unapologetic from Premier Unbelievable. For more shows, resources and our newsletter, visit premierunbelievable.com.